door sales. And I remember I was sitting on a lunch break and watching this these four little girls play up the block from me. It was maybe like 3, 4 blocks, and I was in a predominantly white neighborhood, and it was three white girls and one dark complected Indian girl. And I remember I'm just kind of like ear hustling, and I'm noticing that they're playing a game that the young Indian girl didn't feel good about. And listening to the discourse, just kind of overhearing a little bit, it was very clear that they were making the Indian girl play a role in whatever game they were playing that she didn't feel comfortable with. After more listening, you heard more and more um, that she was basically playing the bad guy. She was playing the role that nobody else wanted to play, and everyone else was the valuable person or the desirable person. That these are the moments that children many times struggle to remedy in their heads. Why am I perpetually being placed in this position, in this role? What I want to talk about today is racial socialization and why it is so important, especially for Black parents or just parents of color, parents who are outside of the white paradigm, um, to teach their children, to share with their children racial situations, experiences, and how they've navigated it in their own life, even if they struggled to navigate it, even if they failed to navigate it, even if they wish they could have something done something different. Talking about our children, talking to our children about those experiences is so important, not just to their safety, but also to their ability to support themselves and ask for help when they need it the most. My background in this field, I've been doing this for a long time. Start off doing Big Brother community service programs, um, outreach programs, things like that. Started doing juvenile detention programs. Got into boys ranches and stuff like that, and then also incarcerated facilities working with men and things like that. And then I got to the clinical side. I begun my master's program in counseling psychology, marriage, and family therapy, and began working as a case manager at a really dope mental health agency in San Jose. And one of my experiences as a case manager was age range. And so I frequently met with these Black students on their campus. And we would talk about how school is going because that was many times the dominant theme: help them do good in school, help them could assess. There was a whole lot more going on around them that was impacting their performance. And so conversations would come about. And I began to realize that so many of these youth were dealing with a slew of issues, from dealing with teachers and educators who were interacting with them in a way that didn't make them feel comfortable or sometimes outright unsafe. Sometimes it was being in schools that were outright unsafe, whether it was socially because there was a lack of protection for Black youth, or maybe it was a lack of access and opportunities. Either way, my job as a case manager was to support them and come up with plans and strategies to help them to navigate it. One of the things that I recognized very quickly when parents would attempt to step into the space or be in a space where they could advocate, a lot of parents didn't know how. A lot of parents would freeze and kind of just concede to what the teacher was saying or suggesting or even implying that their child was like, either good or bad or the like about them. And then they would try to figure it out from there. But something that was really interesting, I got a chance to go to a workshop by Dr. Joy DeGruy. I actually went to two seminars that she had for graduate students in their program. And one of the things that she would start off her sessions with saying is that she would tell this story about watching her granddaughter, and she was like, I bring my granddaughter to school usually in the first week and meet all of her teachers. And she said one of the questions that I would ask their teachers is, how do you plan to address implicit bias as it shows up in the classroom? And she would say the teacher would often pause and kind of like hesitate, not knowing what she was talking about. She was saying, how are you planning to support my Black child, my Black grandchild, with implicit bias? Then the teacher would like get it and be like, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, I'm not racist. I love your granddaughter. I think she's wonderful." And then Dr. Joy DeGruy would promptly say, well, that's the point. That's the point of implicit bias. It's not about what you're intending, it's not about your literal awareness of it. This is what is happening that is covert, that is unconscious, that you aren't even aware is taking place between you and my grandchild while she's in your classroom, while my grandchild is engaging with other students, or maybe a teaching assistant or an administrator, right? And this begs a very important topic, that the question isn't if your child is experiencing um, issues or experiences that are surrounding race. It's how are they experiencing it? It's not if, it's how. What racial socialization does is it creates relationship, a safe relationship between parents and children, and how to begin to formulate language to articulate what types of experiences are happening. For example, I had an experience in graduate school where I had a professor who wanted to do some like cultural education, and she proceeded to put us in an activity that made me feel very uncomfortable. She did one of those equity walks where take a step forward if you had this privilege, take a step back if you dealt with this kind of socialized setback. And basically, I had taken so many steps back that I was up against the wall. I couldn't go back any further. And there was a white guy in the classroom, in our cohort, who took so many steps forward that he was out the door. She had him keep going out the door, right? And then when she was done, I was kind of wondering what direction she was going to take with the discussion. And she was like, brought us all together, and then basically kind of had like a powwow to empathize with the white guy and be like, man, can you imagine how he feels having a, and she kept like going, like, just, I mean, just the total shift of the room was like empathizing with him and his privilege. And it's not that people don't deserve empathy. It's that it was a complete ignoring of those of us who are in the classroom who are dealing with these challenges that are due to racial discrimination and things of that like. Now, here's the thing, I didn't know how to manage that. I was just like, okay, I want to do my best to kind of navigate graduate school. I want to get a good grade. I want to figure out where she's going and what I need to do. It wasn't until years later that my father talked about an experience in college where he dealt with something similar and how he went through it. Now, here's the thing, it didn't mean that my dad had the answers for me. It didn't mean that my dad was going to fix it, but it did mean that I potentially had someone I could go to process it with. It did mean that I potentially had someone that I knew cared about me, who had a similar experience. I wasn't alone, I wasn't by myself. Now, I can go on to other experiences that I've had before that my parents may have also had as well. But the key here is relationship and the sense of connection in our experience. When we don't have that, especially as children, what we do is we internalize and we begin to try to process, how do we find relational and social safety within an environment? And many times, how that plays out is they shrink and conform and contort themselves to figure out how they can fit into a space. Now, what happens when that is a predominantly white space? What happens when that is an environment that doesn't reflect you or your culture or your community? And there are constant barrages of microaggressions, constant barrages of outright racial aggressions. Think about if you ever watched Will Smith's Bel Air on Peacock. The character of Carlton does a great kind of rendition or acting of this scenario where he's in high school and he's talking about the stress that it was for him to try to perform at a high level while dealing with so much social isolation as one of the few black children at Bel Air Academy. Now, here's the thing, many times the plight of these young black students gets completely overlooked unless there's something extreme like drug use, right? Which in Carlton's case came about. Or something's happening where they're acting out and there's a behavioral issue. But what happens when your child just kind of gets used to shrinking? What happens when they just begin to just conform? What happens when they begin to internalize that perspective of themselves and then begin to also view not just themselves, but others who look like them in that same way that they have learned to accept and adopt? They begin to be the black people who look at other black people and go, those people. right? The Key and Peele have a very funny skit where, being the one black guy in the social circle, and they're kind of going back and forth who's going to stay in the acapella group, and they're going at it. There can only be one of us, right? Well, that's a real thing that takes place, especially in suburban like environments. And I couldn't help but think about the Nolan Wells situation, where he's at a party and he's one of the only, if the only, black young adult there, and he ends up dead. And I was thinking about this because I watched this Instagram video where this guy, he asked the question. He's like, if a a black person walks up to you, you're walking into a restaurant, they walk up to you and they just look at you and they go, "We need to go." What would you do? And you look through the comments and everybody's like, "Bruh, I'm out of there. I'm not even hesitating. I'm gone. I'm gone. I'm gone." And one of the comments in there said, one time I was at a party and I was talking with these guys, and a black person came up to me and just said, "This ain't for us." And he said, "Only thing I said was, well, then where are we going?" And they turned around. He said, "They're still friends to this day." There's actually, I would say, magic in the culture. There is a certain level of connection, camaraderie, and safety within our cultural navigations. It's not just this thing that we do, it is creating an internalized community that says we're aware of the threats out there. And how we've learned to navigate it is by having a solidarity amongst us. If you think about in nature, every kind of communal species, right, has this solidarity. Even if you think about, like, I love watching wildlife and all this stuff. If any animal, right, that is not a carnivore sees another one walking through the area, right? One of them sees them, they all sound the alarm, from the monkey to the bird, to the practically the grasshopper, right? Everything sounds the alarm, and everyone is made aware, right? There's a solidarity, and for hundreds of years, Black people have had to navigate colonialism, post-colonialism in this manner, and it still applies to this day. That we have had, as Deontay Wilder said, to this day, we still have had to utilize this camaraderie and connection in order to ensure not just our survival, but our ability to navigate safe and unsafe spaces, places that are for us and not for us. And this is where it's so important that parents are a part of this process of racial socialization. It's not just about telling the stories, it's about creating a kinship and a camaraderie, a sense of connection and an understanding why we support each other, why we come together, why we do things like potlucks and cookouts, why we make sure that we go to each other's birthday parties, why we teach and dance the electric slide together, why we play spades, why we do these things. It's not just because it's fun. It's because it creates a sense of safety and togetherness. And maybe some of the elders and the aunties and uncles could do a better job of making those spaces safe. All right. If you don't know how to play spades, you know what? Hey, don't forget the mission, right? It's community. At the same time, though, it's important that we understand these cultural customs that give us a sense of connection, right? Think about the movie Get Out, right? And it seems like, some might say on the outside, oh, it's just a movie. But some of us, especially us older people, we watch that and we go, oh, no, that's real life. That's real life. Someone to check on you when you're the only other Black person in this party and be like, hey, you good? You don't seem like you're good. There's something going on. You all right? Like, I see you, I acknowledge you, and I'm looking out for you. And that's what our children have to be taught as early as possible. Remember that these experiences start as early as second grade. If not, I'm actually going to go beyond that. Doing research in graduate school, we came across a study where Black boys were 75% more likely to be expelled from preschool than any other demographic. Preschool. Now you can imagine preschool, what are kids doing? There was a whole research study on why this phenomenon was taking place. And so they said, well, we can't watch everything a teacher is watching. So what we're going to do is we're going to place glasses on a teacher that have a camera, and we're just going to follow what they see. And what they recognized was that teachers across the board were over 200 times more likely to look at a black student and perceive their behavior as something that needed to be instructed upon, corrected, or disciplined more so than any other student. When they saw black boys, they saw someone who needed to be corrected, directed, redirected, and therefore it created an unconscious bias of how they engaged with them that led to being 75% more predisposed to being expelled in preschool. Now, these are things that many times families are not aware of. When they come to parent teacher night, they just step in there and they're just like, "Oh, how's my kid doing?" Like, "Well, your kid's talking a lot, but we love him. We love him. He's wonderful, but he just sometimes is not on task." And it's like, but if I don't know that type of research, I might be thinking, "Oh man, maybe it really is my kid." Or maybe, as the research might suggest, that how their behavior is interpreted has a particular bias behind it that then is how they are perceiving their actions that may have created their conclusion. Racial socialization is a parent's number one tool to ensuring that their children understand how to navigate the world that they're walking into. Because we cannot be there with them in schools, because we can't be there with them on their way to school. Right, I just watched a video of a young black kid who got tackled by police officers by mistaken identity. Right, tackled him, dislocated his elbow, you know, and then tried to make up excuses of why. Oh, it wasn't them. It sucks that this is still an environment where we have to have the talk, how to navigate police officers. But when we don't socialize our children, what we do is we undermine their ability to have agency. That is ability to shape their environment actively, to be able to take intentional steps to ensure that their environment is safe, it's empowering, and they know it's for them. There's a reason why black parents tell their kids go to an HBCU because the likelihood of having to deal with racial discrimination, which leads to a lot of students being expelled, kicked out, or performing or underperforming in predominantly white institutions is far lower. So if I'm thinking about my child's success in college, racial socialization says we have to acknowledge this aspect of it. Instead of trying to be blind to it, put on blinders and just hope for the best. And I get it. Some parents feel like they are imposing this experience on their children. They don't want them to have this experience and have to, deal with it. And they feel like it's an imposition. Well, here's the thing: as human beings, especially as children, you have to understand their brains are very elastic. They don't come into this world expecting it to be a certain way. The expectation is that their parents are preparing them for it. They don't go into their world going good, bad, right, wrong. They are observing and learning. Right? Just like we don't worry about imposing something when we tell them to look both ways across the street. Well, that's just a reality. You get hit by a car, that could be it, right? If you see a rabid dog walking towards you, you do what you have to do. You cross the street, right? I don't want to impose a bad perspective of dogs. No, I want to make sure you're safe and trust you to be able to discern between a dog that's rabid and unsafe and a dog that's not, right? It's the same thing about racial socialization is that we have to trust our children, teach our children even how to navigate safe and unsafe environments. And racial socialization is a primary component of that. Look, I appreciate your time. Coming up on 20 minutes. I'm going to try to cut it short or short enough. But this is something that if you haven't started already, start talking with your children about your experiences at whatever grade that they are in, younger or older. Right? Be able to talk to them about your experience in high school when you dealt with a teacher who said that thing or a coach who made that comment, right? Or when somebody tried to touch your hair, right? Or somebody made a comment about your lips or your nose or your skin, right? How it made you feel, what you did about it, what you wish you would have done about it, how you wish you would have navigated it, how you tried to navigate it, right? Ask them what they think about it. Let them chew on the material because what's going to happen is when and if that situation transpires for them, or maybe one of their friends, they'll know or have a sense of how to articulate it, how to navigate it based upon how you did or how you wish you did. And they'll also be able to understand that they're not alone in the experience because trauma takes place when the brain can't make sense of the experience, an experience that disrupts their sense of safety and belonging so severely. When they don't know that the person that loves them the most has had a similar experience that they can hold, and they feel isolated and ostracized from them because they think they're the only ones, it's probably the worst feeling in the world as a parent. We want our children to come to us, but that's going to require some vulnerability and openness. And that starts with racial socialization. I hope that makes sense. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, definitely share the video and leave your comments below. I look forward to talking with you all next time.